Well, greetings to our Family Talk friends. I'm Jim Dobson, and with me is my wife, Shirley. And this little video will help us celebrate a very special occasion. We were married 55 years ago tonight. It was on August 27th, 1960. And we had been college sweethearts for 3 years. We had a wonderful time in college. And at last, we had finished school and we set the date and decided to get married, to join our hearts together forever. And things didn't go as smoothly as we had hoped. 2 weeks before the wedding, I know you remember this, Cheryl, I bought a gleaming white 1957 Ford for us to jumpstart our lives together. And I had owned the world's worst car. That's not an exaggeration. All through college. And it wouldn't run most of the time. And frankly, it was a big piece of junk.
Amen. And one thing was clear. I loved Jim in spite of that old car. It was kind of a cranberry red, and we called it Old Red. It was a 1949 Mercury convertible. And one day we were out driving along at about, I think, 60 miles an hour, and would you believe the top flew off, totally flew off. It was flapping along behind like Superman's cape, and I was so embarrassed. I was
angry.
Stop.
I wouldn't stop because I was mad at the car. And that's why we were so excited to have a newer car. And I drove that Ford off the used car lot, and I'd only gone about a mile. And you're not going to believe this. I'd gone 1 mile, and we were so happy that I leaned over and I kissed Shirley. And it wasn't a big deal. It was just a little peck, really. But just as I kissed her, a guy in front of me slammed on his brakes. And when I looked up, there he was. And I slid into his car and I knocked him into the sitting duck that was in front of him. It was a 3-car crack up. And I'm telling you, I can still see. I've got a videotape in my mind of those fenders coming up like this. The whole front end was wrecked. And I was utterly sick. We were sick.
Absolutely. And we were standing there in the road with traffic backing up behind us. The drivers were all honking and upset. And we were so afraid that someone had seen the kiss that caused that accident. And we looked over, and there were 2 little boys, and they were pointing. And one of them asked the other, "What happened?" The second kid said, "Well, that guy in that wrecked car kissed his girlfriend, and he whacked the car in front of him." And we were thinking, get out of here, you little brats.
They had seen it all, and they had it within their power to tell the police and everybody what I had done. But they went on their way. And the deductible on the insurance was $100, which meant that I couldn't buy Shirley a wedding ring for the big night. So I bought a simple little silver band to go with the engagement ring. And a year later, I had just a little more money, and I purchased a little diamond ring and gave it to my bride on her first anniversary. And it was a Saturday morning. You remember that?
And you know what, Jim? That wasn't the end of our troubles, was it?
Hardly. The day of our wedding, Pasadena, California, was sweltering hot. And the air conditioner burned out on the church that afternoon. And it was about 100 degrees inside. Yes. And the organist was late. And about 200 guests were sitting there sweltering and waiting for the ceremony to start. And then the candles were melting, and they bent over like this. The bridesmaids were sweating, and the photographer was grumpy, as I recall. And we couldn't afford many flowers, but those that we had were wilted that night.
And Jim's dad performed the ceremony, and after he prayed the dedicatory prayer, he said in his Louisiana twang, "Kiss her, Jim."
Sounds just like him. And we had only just begun. You know, it's hard to believe that it has been 55 years since that time. But it was such a romantic time for us. We took a 7-day honeymoon up the coast of California and returned with only $100 between us. And a few days after getting home, we both started teaching in public schools, but we knew we weren't going to get a paycheck until 5 weeks later. So we had $100 to take us 5 weeks to feed us and meet all our bills and put gasoline in the car.
Do you remember we ate fake tacos with weenies and tortillas and pork and beans and other cheap stuff like that for probably almost 5 weeks?
Yeah.
And our tiny little apartment was only $65 per month because Jim watered the lawn and took out the trash, which brought the rent down.
We had absolutely nothing in those days, and it really did look for a while like we were going to keep it, but it was a very special time.
We cooked together after teaching every day, and in the summer, Jim worked at a hospital for the mentally disabled. He enrolled in graduate school the next fall, and we began a lifelong pattern of working almost 80 hours a week. We were exhausted most of the time. But there was one occasion that I want to tell you about because it is very precious to me, very special. About 2 years into our married life, Jim became concerned because we had had almost no time alone together. One night he asked me to take a walk with him, and on that stroll, he told me he missed our quiet times together too, and he was going to take a semester off from graduate school so we could reconnect with one another. That was a big sacrifice for him because he was a highly dedicated student, and taking time off from USC was his way of telling me that our marriage meant more to him than his professional ambitions. And I think I cried when he told me that. But there's never been a time in our 55 years of marriage when I have felt neglected by him. I would marry Jim 1,000 times over. And I truly thank God that he gave us to each other for a lifetime.
I want to tell our viewers that the Lord put his blessings on our relationship, and that was the secret success of our marriage. We prayed and read the Bible together, and of course always worshiped as a family. And Christ really was the centerpiece, the head of our home.
Those of you who are just starting out as a married couple, I want to give you some really important advice. We urge you to give priority to your faith. We've found that praying together is not only a bonding time, but is the best way to work out a conflict. And so I just encourage all of you to not neglect that part of your marriage.
Well, happy 55th wedding anniversary to you, Shirley.
And to you, Jim.